Revealed. The incredible moment a widow offered to care for her late husband's children and him. Sarah stood frozen at the front door, heart hammering against her chest. Two unfamiliar faces stared back at her, their eyes filled with a mix of grief and anger. Mark and Emily, Tom's estranged kids from a life she never knew existed. She thought she had known everything about Tom, but this revelation felt catastrophic. Strangers, carrying an unimaginable load of sorrow, represented a future tangled with ambiguity that she never anticipated. "Mom?" Her youngest child, Ben, called softly from behind her. The innocence in his voice cut through her turmoil. Was she being a good mother if she let these new kids into their home? Or was she betraying Tom's memory by even considering it? Torn between compassion and self-preservation, Sarah's mind raced. She had already lost so much. Could she handle more heartbreak? The town's whispers echoed in her ears. A widow offering to care for her late husband's children? Could she handle the judgment if things went awry? Would she be seen as the woman who couldn't keep her own children secure, already unraveling at the seams? Guilt pooled in her stomach as she thought of Ben and Lila. What if welcoming Mark and Emily meant sacrificing everything she worked so hard to provide for her own children? Her own voice trembled as she invited them in. I guess we can talk." Each word felt like a thread fraying under the pressure of impossible expectations. In the dim light of their home, her once happy refuge felt foreboding, and the laughter that used to fill it had turned ghostly, overshadowed by their collective grief. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The energy shifted as silence thickened between them. Mark clenched his jaw, fists balled at his sides. Emily looked lost, a storm of emotions swirling behind her red-rimmed eyes. Sarah felt the weight of their resentment clawing at her. A plea for acknowledgement of their pain. Could she bridge the chasm of despair? Or were they doomed to be trapped forever within their own sorrow? Discomfort bubbled beneath her skin. What would Tom have wanted? The image of his warm smile, the way he talked about sacrifice, blurred with the haunting realization that he hadn't been forthcoming about his past. What if there was resentment in his memory, and this nuisance was merely an extension of it? That thought pierced her defenses, revealing cracks in her facade. Could she find the courage to embrace a new family dynamic? Or would she shatter under the weight of the past? Sarah found herself standing at the precipice, teetering between love and obligation, as fear gripped her soul. How could she confront their anger without losing herself in the process? The uncertainty loomed like an approaching storm, and the path to harmony felt obscured by thick, choking fog. With her heart racing and breath irregular, she faced them, uncertainty flooding her mind. Could she transform this chaos into belonging, or would she forever be haunted by the choices that lay before her? The shadows lingered, whispering doubts, intensifying the turmoil as Sarah stood resolute, yet on the edge, longing for answers that felt just out of reach. The air crackled with tension as the silence stretched. Each second felt like an eternity, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on Sarah. She glanced at Ben, who still peered around her legs, oblivious to the storm brewing in the room. His presence was both a comfort and a reminder of everything she had fought for. "Look, this is all a lot," Sarah finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I didn't know about either of you. I don't know how to do this, but I want to try." Mark shot her a skeptical look, the hurt visible in his hardened demeanor. "You want to try? You think that just because you married him, you can swoop in and fix things now? You didn't live with him. You didn't see him struggle." Her heart sank. His words were arrows dipped in resentment. "I understand," she said, holding her ground. "I lost Tom too. I didn't know about you, but he loved you. I know that because he talked about you when he thought no one was listening." Emily stepped forward, her expression softening slightly. "He loved us? Then why didn't he try to reach out? Why didn't he bring us into his life? The question sliced deep, revealing cracks in both their histories. Maybe it was good to vocalize what lay beneath the surface. I don't have those answers, Sarah admitted, her voice faltering. But I can only imagine how painful it must have been for you. You had a father who was here, yet also so far away. Ben wandered into the living room, breaking the intense gaze. He picked up a toy off the floor, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. Can we play together? He asked, a childishly innocent invitation echoing hope. Mark and Emily exchanged glances, the ice in their expressions beginning to thaw, if only slightly. Sarah seized that moment of fragile connection. Why don't we all sit down and talk about Tom? Maybe if we share our memories. That won't bring him back, Mark interrupted, bitterness creeping back into his tone. What's done is done. You don't know anything about our lives after he left. Sarah felt the tears welling. No, I don't. But I want to understand. I want to know who he really was, a complete picture, not just my memories scrambled with darkness. Emily looked at her, and for a flicker of a moment, the skepticism melted away, replaced with vulnerability. He wasn't just the guy who came home smiling. He left us. He never looked back. The pieces fell into place as Sarah processed their pain. In this moment, she realized she wasn't merely a bystander, but an active participant in this shared grief. It was her chance to act with purpose, rather than react out of fear. She needed to emerge stronger, for herself, and for the kids. Maybe we can learn together, she suggested, a surge of determination rising in her. It's not about forgetting. It's about finding a way to heal. Mark's glare softened. Emily's uncertainty lingered. But an ember of hope glinted in her eyes. Sarah felt a shift within herself. This turmoil could be the catalyst for metamorphosis, a chance to redefine family amid lingering scars. Could she embody resilience, showing them that together they could forge a new path? Just as she began to feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a sudden knock on the door pierced the quiet. Whatever emotions had just surfaced in the room now hung precariously in the air, vulnerable to interruption. Sarah turned sharply, heart pounding again. What could possibly await them outside that door, ready to reshape their fragile truce? In that moment of uncertainty, she wasn't just a widow anymore. She was a woman ready to confront the unknown, fueled by newfound strength, and the time had come to face all of it. For a heartbeat, Sarah's body froze at the sound of the knock. The world outside felt simultaneously distant and crushingly immediate, the door standing as the barrier between her evolving sense of self and whatever revelations awaited her. She deliberated the possibility of retreat, but that thought dissolved under the weight of determination she felt growing within. "Who is it?" she called, her voice breaking momentarily as uncertainty clawed at her resolve. The knock came again, this time followed by a voice she could barely place. "It's me, Jake." From the neighbors. "Is everything okay?" Jake. He was a cordial face who waved as he passed, the kind of neighbor she rarely interacted with. Yet his presence now felt like an odd lifeline, a tether to normalcy in the most abnormal of circumstances. Sarah managed a nod, though no one could see her. Just a moment. She turned back to her newfound family, instinctively preparing herself for whatever awaited them. The vulnerability they had all displayed a moment before hovered like a fragile drone between them, and she didn't want to shatter it by retreating into isolation. She swung the door open, forcing a smile that felt dangerously close to a grimace. Jake stood there, a slight frown creasing his forehead. He took in her heavily lidded eyes and the two teenagers standing near her like sentinels. "I just wanted to check in. Saw some commotion through the window. Everything all right?" "Yeah, we're fine," she replied, her heart racing. "Just family stuff." Family. The word resonated, carrying both weight and potential. She turned her attention to the kids, who were visibly confused. Their initial thawing might be slipping away under pressure. "Guys, this is Jake," she prompted, stepping slightly aside to invite him in. "He's just making sure we're okay." Jake's presence seemed to pull a line in the sand. He was an outsider, but in this charged moment, the role felt essential. It grounded her as she faced the ongoing confrontation with Mark and Emily. Is it still too soon to talk about Tom? Jake asked carefully, the hesitation in his voice providing her with a keen awareness that he understood the gravity of what was transpiring. She inhaled deeply, piecing together her thoughts. It's not about forgetting him, but exploring who he was to all of us. I think we need to, even if it's painful. Mark's skepticism flared anew, but Emily's resolve seemed to push through. I don't know. It feels like picking at a wound. Maybe it's time to stop avoiding the pain, Sarah asserted. To embrace the discomfort and work through it together. We're not here to erase memories. We're here to build something anew. Jake stood quietly, observing the internal struggle playing out. He put a hand on Mark's shoulder, an unspoken gesture of solidarity. The teenagers were struggling to reconcile their emotions, and he seemed determined to amplify their voices in this tangled web of grief. She could feel stakes rising. Would Mark allow that door to open, or would he continue to barricade their past? The seconds ticked, tension coiling tightly in the air. Okay, Mark finally conceded, though wariness lingered in his tone. But it won't change anything. No, Sarah said, an unexpected confidence taking root. But there's value in knowing the truth, even if it hurts. In that moment, she felt the potential for transformation hang in the air, not just for her, but for all of them. Let's take this one step at a time, starting with a simple memory, she suggested. What do you remember about him? The air thickened again with uncertainty, but as they looked at one another, a flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps this uncomfortable sharing was the first step towards healing, a necessary plunge into the unknown. Just as they began to share tentative fragments of their stories, the doorbell rang once more, this time a rapid series of impatient chimes. The shift in Sarah's gut tinged with dread. Who could it be now, unearthing even deeper layers of unresolved feelings? She took a moment to collect her thoughts, setting the stage for whatever might come next. This was her chance now, not just to honor Tom, but to redefine what family truly meant as they embraced the complexity of grief together. Yet uncertainty loomed like a shadow, waiting patiently to remind her of how perilous this journey could turn. What are we actually willing to confront today? She asked herself as she steeled herself for another unexpected turn. The time for action was upon her again. But would she have the courage to face whatever, or whomever, stood at the door next? As Sarah stood at the threshold with her hand resting on the doorknob, a palpable tension filled the air. A flood of emotions surged through her, fear, uncertainty, and a strain of determination that had grown throughout the confrontation. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the progress they'd made, and the necessity of confronting anything that lay beyond the door. She opened it. Standing there was an unexpected visitor, Claire, a former colleague of Tom's, clutching an envelope tightly against her chest. Her eyes widened in surprise at the gathered group, caught off guard by their somber atmosphere. "Sarah," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry to intrude. I hope this isn't a bad time." No, Sarah replied, forcing warmth into her tone, recognizing the shared grief between them. "Come in." As Claire stepped through the entrance, the envelope slipped from her grasp, landing silently between them. Sarah bent down to retrieve it, suddenly hit by an instinctive sense of foreboding. Claire's hands shook slightly, and her pale complexion reflected the weight of something significant resting on her shoulders. "Please, have a seat," Sarah gestured, motioning toward the living room. It felt surreal, as though the world had shifted on its axis in just a few moments. The air grew heavier, and her heart raced in anticipation of what this visit might bring. After taking a seat on the couch, Claire looked at the two teenagers, her gaze penetrating as if searching for something buried deep within the shared grief of their present. "I wanted to talk to you all about Tom. He had some things he intended to share with you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark's eyes flared with skepticism as he crossed his arms. "What things?" "They were meant for you," Claire said, her voice quaking with emotion. "I know this isn't the right time, but I can't help it. I found this among his belongings after he passed." She glanced at Sarah before continuing. "He had written a few letters, one for each of you. I think he wanted to clarify things, to be sure you knew how much you meant to him. The room held its breath. As the guarded walls around Mark and Emily began to crack open ever so slightly, Sarah sensed the delicate balance of vulnerability mixed with the need for connection. This could be the turning point, a moment of revelation for them all. "What did he say?" Emily asked, curiosity sparking amid her earlier fears. Claire retrieved the envelope from Sarah's hands and laid it flat on her lap. "I'm not privy to their contents. I only found them and thought, you should all decide if you want to read them or not." The silence stretched, each of them grappling with the possibility contained within those pages. Sarah felt momentum build inside her, pushing against the temptation to shield them from more pain. Could this be the bridge they needed toward healing? Or would it only deepen their wounds? Mark suddenly stood, irritation flaring. "We don't want whatever unresolved issues Tom left behind." "Maybe it's time to confront those issues," Sarah interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "This could give us a chance to understand him better, to connect as a family despite everything. We owe him that much." "Do we?" Mark shot back, his frustration palpable. "What if it turns out to be just more guilt?" As Claire sat in fraught silence, Sarah met Mark's intense gaze. His anger was a reflection of his fear, the fear of facing the legacy Tom left behind. "Perhaps it's not about guilt," she said, her voice steady, "but about growth. Acknowledging the past to build something stronger together. I think we should at least hear what he wanted to share." The heaviness of Sarah's words hung in the air, offering both a challenge and an invitation. Could this be the moment they moved beyond the boundaries of hurt? And just as she looked around at the uncertain expressions of her newfound family, the doorbell chimed again, echoing their unresolved emotions and simmering tensions. With her heart pounding, Sarah thought, "What does fate want from us today?" The question gnawed at her as she prepared to face yet another gust of uncertainty that could either forge or fracture their fragile new bonds. Would she be brave enough to answer? As Sarah hesitated at the threshold, the doorbell's chime reverberated like an unanswered question in her mind. She glanced at Claire, whose wide eyes mirrored her own apprehension. The envelope lay untouched, a silent testament to secrets waiting to be uncovered. But seconds felt like hours, and she knew they had to confront whatever lay beyond. Together. "Should we answer it?" Emily's voice broke through the tension, her apprehension evident. "Definitely," Sarah replied, pushing through her own uncertainty. She opened the door to reveal an older man, his familiar features in stark contrast to the emotional chaos brewing within the house. It was Mr. Thompson, their neighbor. He often provided a steady presence, but today he looked particularly serious. "Sarah, I'm here for you," he said, his voice steady. "Is everything okay?" "Not really," she admitted, managing a weak smile. "Just a lot to process. But I appreciate you checking in." "Family?" he asked, glancing past her to Mark and Emily, who lingered close. "Yes, trying to hold it all together," Sarah said vaguely, aware that even she didn't fully grasp the riddle they were trying to solve. "Just remember you're not alone," Mr. Thompson said, a weight of understanding present in his gaze. "If you need anything, let me know." He left as quickly as he had come, but his reassurance lingered in the air. It struck Sarah, the importance of vulnerability in those moments, how welcoming support didn't confirm weakness, but rather emphasize strength. After all, what was family if not the ability to lean on each other in times of chaos? Returning to the living room, Sarah resolved to lean into the fear that gripped her heart. "About those letters," she began, shifting her focus back to the envelope resting on the couch. "I think we should read them together. We can each take a turn. And if it gets uncomfortable, we can pause." Mark scowled, but the edge of his defiance softening as his sister spoke. "It can't be worse than not knowing," Emily added, her voice firmer than before. Confirmation hung in the air as she noted their nods, however hesitant they might be. "I'll start," Claire offered, picking up the letters as she settled into the corner of the couch, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She carefully opened the first one, her hands trembling slightly. A hush descended as she began to read, her voice wavering, yet resolute. "Dear Mark, I know things have been rocky between us." The words dripped with a heavy honesty that resonated through the room, prompting an intimate silence that seemed to bind them together. The revelation of Tom's regrets reverberated off the walls, confronting their demons head-on. With every word Claire read, Sarah felt a shift in her resolve, a realization that was almost magnetic. The courage it took to confront one's past was immeasurable. It inspired her as she observed her family react to their father's reflections. Mark's face was a whirlwind of emotions: disbelief, anger, and finally, a flicker of acceptance. For the first time, Sarah witnessed him grappling with his pain instead of battling against it. Emily's eyes glistened as she absorbed the weight of their father's confessions, small breakthroughs illuminating the nuanced layers of grief coloring their shared experience. By the end of the first letter, Claire wiped a tear from her cheek, her breath catching in her throat. He loved you all. He just didn't know how to say it. As the evening wore on and the weight of each letter sank in, Sarah knew they stood at a precipice. From this moment, they could either embrace the darkness of the past or cultivate their own light for the future. Is it the right path for us? She pondered, scanning their faces for any sign of agreement. Uncharted territories spread in front of them like an open map, an opportunity to redefine their identities as a family without Tom. But just as she started to feel a glimmer of hope, Mark's phone buzzed, shattering the fragile atmosphere they had begun to mend. He glanced at the screen, his expression morphing into one of alarm. "What now?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. They were barely emerging from one storm when another loomed on the horizon. "It's about Tom's estate," he replied, tension tightening his jaw. "We need to talk." The invitation for discussion hung in the air, swirling with implications that threatened their newfound sense of connection. Would they survive another confrontation, or would they find themselves unraveling once more? Sarah knew one thing: the journey had only just begun. The silence that followed Mark's revelation felt suffocating as Sarah braced herself for what lay ahead. Navigating the choppy waters of grief, confusion, and newfound truths seemed almost impossibly daunting. But one thing she understood deeply was the necessity of confronting the estate talk. They couldn't bury their heads in the sand. It was time to face whatever waited. "Let's sit down then," she suggested, motioning toward the oak dining table that bore witness to countless family dinners, times filled with laughter now overshadowed by the weight of this moment. As the four of them settled into their chairs, Sarah focused on her siblings' faces, trying to gauge their readiness for what might unfold. "Dad's estate. It's complicated," Mark began, his voice firm yet laced with hesitation. "There's more than just what he left behind. We need to talk about how we handle it." "What do you mean?" Claire asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Mark took a deep breath, a sign of gathering strength. "It's more than dividing assets. It's about what he intended, what he wanted for us. The letters hint at our future together, or at least the possibility of figuring it out." "And what if we don't want anything to do with it?" Emily interjected, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "We can't just pick up where he left off like it's nothing." As her siblings began to argue, Sarah felt a surge of urgency. They were at a crucial juncture. This wasn't just about inheritance. It represented their lives and identities moving forward. "We also have to think about his wishes. Maybe he didn't have it all figured out, but he was trying. We have to honor that." The argument subsided, shifting into an uneasy silence. Each sibling wrestled with the implications of the conversation, and it seemed as though Sarah was the only one prepared to carve a path through the murky waters they found themselves in. "Here's what I think," she said, her voice steady as she unwrapped her thoughts. "We have options for the estate, but no matter what, we have to decide how we want to remember Dad. It's our choice to reshape our narrative together." Claire blinked, her eyes reflecting uncertainty. "You mean, we can do that?" "Absolutely," Sarah affirmed, feeling a newfound spark ignite within her. "We have to take control. Let's consider what each of us wants. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can find a way to coexist, support each other through all of this." Emily nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding breaking through her earlier resistance. "Maybe it's time we define ourselves, not based on Dad's legacy, but on how we choose to construct our own." Gradually, Sarah recognized the growing courage within her siblings. They were awakening to the possibilities that lay ahead, unlocking compassion where bitterness had once taken root. It was liberating, but it also terrified her. Reshaping familial ties felt like wielding a sculptor's chisel. delicately crafting something raw and misshapen into beauty while risking it crumbling under pressure. Feeling the pulse of unity and dissent in the air, Sarah stood. Let's look into what he left behind together. We can sort through everything. Not to relive his past, but to create our future. Mark's brow furrowed slightly, but his tone softened. I think I'm in. If we're doing this, it's together. As they nodded amongst themselves, a palpable sense of camaraderie blossomed in the room, albeit mixed with ambivalence. Every decision they would make from this point on came with its weight. They were no longer merely his children. They were reclaiming their roles in a narrative yet to unfold, one where their voices resonated. Yet still, hovering in the back of her mind was a gnawing doubt. A question of whether confronting their father's estate would strengthen their bonds or expose fault lines they couldn't repair. They had taken a step, but a monumental task awaited them. And as they began discussing their game plan, Sarah sensed a subtle shift in energy. Unexpectedly, Emily's phone buzzed on the table, drawing their attention. The screen illuminated a name that sent tremors through Sarah's chest. It's Mom," Emily said, her eyes wide as she lifted the phone, uncertainty woven in each word. Sarah's heart raced. If their mother had an emotional stake in what was happening inside this house, how would it change everything they had just begun to forge? Was this a signal of a looming return to the past, or an unexpected opportunity for healing? Perhaps the real journey was only just beginning. The weight of Emily's announcement lingered thick in the air. What had initially felt like a collaborative turning point now teetered back toward the precipice of unresolved emotions. Sarah's instincts flared. This was not just a simple phone call. It carried the potential to unearth hidden dynamics that had long since lain dormant beneath the facade of familial normalcy. "Should you answer?" Claire asked, her gaze flickering between the phone screen and Emily's precarious expression. Emily hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. "What if she wants to talk about Dad? I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "Maybe that's the conversation we've been avoiding," Sarah suggested, gently probing Emily's fear. It might clarify some things. The thought both terrified and invigorated her. If they were to honor their father's wishes and rebuild their narrative, confronting their mother could be a pivotal moment. Yet that prospect inevitably drummed up buried resentment and unprocessed grief. Sarah felt the adrenaline pulse through her veins, compelling her forward. Emily finally exhaled and pressed the answer button, holding the phone to her ear. "Mom?" The line crackled momentarily before their mother's voice came through, sounding achingly familiar, yet shrouded in an unfamiliar distance. Sarcastic tenderness and nostalgia nestled in each word. "Emily, hi. I hope it's okay to call. I just heard about your father." That simple admission unraveled a rush of tension within the room. Memories of their mother's laughter echoed alongside the persistent ache of loss, sparking mixed emotions in Sarah. As her mother talked, explaining her unexpected feelings about returning to the house, Sarah found herself questioning her own readiness to face the larger family dynamics she had skirted around for far too long. "Are we really doing this?" she thought, biting down on her resolve. "Am I prepared for the truth?" Mark sat in silence, a newfound introspective frown deepening as he listened. Claire fiddled with her napkin, clenching it, a visible reflection of her internal struggle. Sarah felt as if they were standing on the edge of an emotional cliff, each sibling engaging in their framework of defense while floundering on shaky ground. Awash in uncertainty, an idea began to form in Sarah's mind. She'd always been the type to analyze and strategize, often avoiding confrontation for fear of what it could unravel. But this was a turning point. They needed to decipher the tangled implications of their family history, and that meant confronting not only their mother, but also the ghosts that had been haunting their shared dynamic. As Emily's conversation deepened, the room began to swell with conflicting emotions, a cauldron of vulnerabilities simmering beneath a thin surface of anger, love, and everything in between. Sarah felt her heart race, fueled by a sudden determination to redirect the energy toward growth. "Maybe it's time for me to step up," she thought, urgency coursing through her. Each family member had their individual burdens to bear. What if she took the initiative to recalibrate the narrative by suggesting a family meeting? An honest-to-the-point dialogue about grief could provide clarity and foster healing. "Emily," she said, slowly drawing her siblings' attention. "After this conversation, let's all get together. I think it's incredibly important for us to discuss how to approach everything moving forward. Not just Dad's estate, but us, as a family. We need to figure this out together." Emily nodded, a spark of understanding igniting behind her eyes. Mark, reflecting on their mother's tone through the phone, looked contemplative. Claire also made a hesitant gesture of agreement, perhaps sensing that their bond hinged on the necessity to confront their shared history. But what if the truth was too painful? What if secrets from the past grew too great to bear? The questions slithered in the back of Sarah's mind, each one morphing into a conundrum that swirled with ever-increasing intensity. As the call drew to a close, Emily's expression shifted from uncertainty to resolve, the eldest sister reinstating a sense of responsibility. "Mom and I will talk more," she affirmed. "But we need to be honest with ourselves. We can't work through this fractured narrative unless we want to face our own truths." Sarah felt emboldened, yet fragile, as they all braced for the implications of unity and vulnerability. Would their intent to rebuild be enough to withstand the effort? The door to their past had creaked open, and as they prepared for the conversation that lay ahead, Sarah sensed an urgency within her. Something had to give, or everything could threaten to fall apart. What if embracing their father's intent meant reconciling with their mother and, in doing so, unearthing long-dormant vulnerabilities that threatened to reshape not only family dynamics, but also their individual sense of self? The prelude to emotional exposure was just beginning, and each sibling stood at the door of their own reckoning. Would they walk through, hand in hand, or find themselves trapped in a cycle of blame and regret? The heaviness of their shared silence lingered as the phone call ended. Emily's voice still echoed in the corners of the room, but Sarah was already plugged into a headspace where clarity and chaos collided. Her sisters and brother remained visibly engaged, but all Sarah could digest was the notion that they were on the cusp of true grafting, a critical moment where past wounds could either be cleansed or exacerbate into festering lesions. "Are we really going to do this?" she whispered to herself, a question that had haunted her throughout the years. Emotions swirled within her, a cocktail of determination and apprehension. Confronting their mother meant confronting her own reflections, failures, expectations, resentments, all layered under the banner of family loyalty. "Let's reframe it," she decided internally, crafting a strategy with the skill of a chess player anticipating the next pivotal moves. "This is not just about what Dad left us materially, but also what he entrusted us with emotionally." With newfound resolve, she focused on Mark, whose demeanor suggested the seeds of contemplation were taking root. "Mark, how do you think Mom feels about stepping back into the house she left?" she prodded, testing the waters. Listening carefully for a flicker of insight, Sarah yearned for him to articulate what lay beneath the surface. His brow furrowed, the way it always did when he wrestled with thoughts. "I think she feels scared but needs to do it to acknowledge what happened. There's no moving forward without facing the past," he replied, a hint of vulnerability in his tone. Sarah nodded, appreciating how the conversation had shifted to a shared exploration, rather than a confrontation. She felt a budding collaboration take shape. Perhaps in voicing their uncertainties, they'd pave a path supportive enough for each of them to walk through. Claire interjected, "I just hope this doesn't turn into a blame game. It's her house. The memories we carry in there aren't just ours." The acknowledgement of their mother's role shifted the atmosphere, casting a dark shadow of responsibility over them. Sarah's mind raced through the implications of such a dynamic shift. And what about us? What are we prepared to admit? While everyone contemplated the uncharted waters ahead, Sarah's internal monologue intensified with urgency. What if they each took a step toward unearthing personal truths? In doing so, they wouldn't just heal the fractures, but also reinstate their identities amidst the redefined landscape of their family. Meeting with our mother can't be just a transactional exchange about the house or the estate. We need to put our cards on the table, share our perspectives, express our pain and grievances, Sarah urged, her voice rising with determination. Let's create an agenda, discuss our feelings, and figure out what we want moving forward. Family therapy? An honest dialogue? Mark looked intrigued, while Emily studied Sarah with an appreciation that made her pulse quicken. I think that's a good idea, Sarah. Let's not just react. Let's respond with understanding and purpose. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since she had stepped into this tumultuous sea of emotions, she felt anchored. This was a chance not just to mend gaps within their family, but to rise above them, to pursue a collective path of discovery. But uncertainty still loomed, hovering like a specter. Would they really have the courage to face the painful truths intertwined with familial affection? Was Sarah prepared to confront, validate, and potentially forgive her own deeply buried grievances? The prospect of family therapy blossomed in her mind. A double-edged sword. Could they pull it off without unraveling all the tightly woven narratives built around their respective identities? As silence fell once again, Sarah's heart pounded with the rhythm of impending revelations. The scale of their next steps rested not only in initiating conversations, but also in mustering the resilience to absorb what might come tumbling down. The road ahead looked fraught with danger, yet undeniably rewarding, should they tread with honesty and compassion. And at that moment, Sarah understood. The story they were about to write could redefine them as individuals, siblings, and perhaps even as kin nested in the bright light of understanding. But before that golden dawn broke, she could feel the storm raging within her, preparing to challenge everything she thought she had mastered about her family. Would they brave the emotional tempest together, or allow it to sweep them into the abyss of silence once more? The truth was far from calm, and with it, a clearer picture of their shared legacy awaited. Sarah sat in the stillness of the living room, digesting the implications of their emotional discussion. The creaking of the old house enveloped her in a cloak of memories, shadows of laughter and sorrow intermingling in her mind. How many times had she yearned for the warmth of family unity, yet felt it dissipate in the wake of reality? This moment, she understood, would demand courage, a willingness to confront what lay buried beneath their shared history. Preparation is key, she whispered softly, a mantra to ground herself. No longer would she allow fear to dictate the terms of her existence. Determined to establish clarity, she began to map out her thoughts like a blueprint for a house under construction. This wasn't just a conversation with her mother. It was a pilgrimage through her past. Drawing her resolve, she turned to her siblings. What if each of us put together our main concern or expectation? We can share these during our meeting. Maybe we can prepare responses to one another too. Ideally ones that foster understanding instead of conflict. Mark nodded, but Claire crossed her arms, clearly skeptical. And what if Mom dismisses us? What if this whole thing backfires? Then we'll know we've tried, Sarah countered sharply, her heartbeat quickening. This was it. It wasn't just about mending family ties, but about affirming her own boundaries, her own values. She felt a spark ignite within her. Every challenge, every doubt they faced was now the soil in which her personal growth could flourish. While Claire mulled over Sarah's proposition, she silently scolded herself for allowing pessimism to overshadow her belief in progress. As her siblings discussed potential hurdles, Sarah reflected on her relationship with their mother, the painful echoes from her childhood reverberating through her thoughts. Would she be brave enough to face the woman who had once imposed her expectations so heavily on Sarah's shoulders? A sudden wave of anxiety washed over her. She recalled instances when her mother had belittled her choices, moments that shaped her into someone perpetually seeking approval. Yet, this time would be different. She would be standing her ground. Are we going to show Mum our true selves instead of the fragmented versions she knows? Sarah threw the question into the air, feeling it hang there, charged with uncertainty. If we're not honest, we might as well not go at all. Emily's face softened. You're right. Maybe honesty is the only leverage we have left. If we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we could finally break down those walls. The conversation began to shift toward what they had bottled up for years, confessions blurring into a unified plea for understanding. Each sibling's grievances emerged slowly, an easing of tension as they prepared for the storm to come. In the midst of their sharing, Sarah realized they were building a safety net, a collective strength that transcended their individual struggles. If they could stand together, perhaps the rush of their shared commitment would provide the momentum needed to confront their mother head-on. But in the recesses of Sarah's mind, a new anxiety brewed. Would their mother regard their attempts through the lens of a judge or a parent? Adversarial confrontations were all she'd known, but she could feel the possibility for dialogue beginning to take root. Yet, what would happen if she elicited defensiveness instead of understanding? As dread danced at the edges of her excitement, Sarah's determination hardened. She could control her approach, her tone, and her intent. Guided by that revelation, she began mentally rehearsing her words, wanting them to resonate where frustration and hurt had once prevailed. She looked around the room at her siblings, fueled by a newfound clarity. Their embryo of communal growth might just be enough to ignite change. But would it also expose her vulnerabilities? Would it unravel what she had painstakingly constructed as shields? With every passing moment, the thrill of the impending confrontation mingled with trepidation. The road ahead promised to be both painful and liberating. And within her, the ever-increasing storm of emotions begged for release. They were approaching a pivotal juncture, one that could reshape their identities. The anticipation was electric, teetering on the edge of a significant change, one that would demand every ounce of courage Sarah could muster. As they began to sketch an outline for their family meeting, she knew. The hourglass was turning, and soon, time would reveal all. But the question remained, would they emerge reborn from the ashes of their past? Or would they simply fuel the flames of their discontent? The moment of reckoning loomed on the horizon, threatening to challenge the very essence of who they believed they were meant to be as a family. In the weeks following the tumultuous family meeting, Sarah felt an internal shift. Accepting her role as a mediator and advocate for open communication, she had begun to redefine not only her relationships with Mark and Emily, but also her sense of self. Each shared conversation became a stepping stone, leading her deeper into understanding both her siblings and the complexities of grief. With each passing day, Sarah invested time in articulating her feelings about Tom's legacy. Not strictly through the lens of sorrow, but rather as a means of celebration mingled with understanding. It was a delicate balance, but through practice, she discovered a resilience she never knew she had. Their interactions became less about the shadows of the past and more about the promise of a new foundation. Mark opened up about his anger, revealing defenses built against disappointment and abandonment. Emily, typically the most reserved, began to share her memories of fragmented happiness with Tom, punctuated by glimpses of pain. In this exchange, Sarah saw not just her siblings' vulnerabilities, but also her own. A growing realization that clarity didn't necessitate perfection, only authenticity. The narrative of them, the estranged children, became something else entirely. A narrative of unity where bonds, once thought irrevocably severed by loss, began knitting themselves anew. Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment as they grew collectively stronger, layering emotional support over individual grief. Each time a memory was shared, it transformed from a lingering shadow into a part of their legacy they could reclaim. Then came the pivotal day when they chose to revisit their father's home. This once foreboding space now felt like a canvas to be redefined. Armed with the letters Tom had composed, a tangible bridge between the past and their present, they approached the house uncertain yet determined. As they stepped inside, an overwhelming stillness enveloped them. The air was thick with nostalgia and unspoken words. Sarah led her siblings toward the kitchen, the heart of every home where laughter had once formed a backdrop to family meals. "This is where we begin," she declared, soaking in the familiarity of the room that now held new significance. Mark spoke first. "Let's read the letters together. We can share what we're feeling as we go." His voice, usually laced with bravado, held a rare hint of vulnerability. As they settled around the table, Emily reached for the first letter, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'll start," she offered, her voice steady yet soft. With each word read aloud, they absorbed their father's reflections on regret and love. The revelations nestled into a shared understanding, a tapestry of past affections and unresolved tensions now weaving together. Sarah watched as each sibling confronted their grievances through the words penned by Tom. With every letter, their emotions flowed. They laughed at cherished memories and wept over unhealed wounds. It became a cathartic release, serving as a reminder that their grief didn't need to divide them. Rather, it could unite them as they confronted their journey toward healing. "Dad wished we understood each other," Emily said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "He wanted to leave us something more than just possessions." Through the exploration of each letter, The siblings started discussing their familial expectations under the dim light of the kitchen, sparking an enlightening conversation about their desires for the future. They contemplated their roles going forward in what felt like a long-awaited reformation of family ties. "It's about us, not just what he left behind," Sarah emphasized, her heart swelling with hope. "We can build something new, a family based on understanding, not resentment." As they revisited their memories, the kitchen echoed with laughter, a contrast to the heavy silence it had once contained. Sarah felt the flickering warmth of shared purpose enveloping them. This was her achievement, her legacy emerging into the light. With every memory reclaimed, she also found herself shedding the labels of grief that once defined her existence. Days turned into weeks, and as they solidified their family dynamic, Sarah felt an unshakable confidence in her convictions. She graduated from the role of a grieving widow to a dedicated daughter, sister, and now the architect of their collective narrative. The final act of reclamation happened a few months later when Sarah organized a family event, a gathering not steeped in sorrow but pervaded by a spirit of celebration, honor, and kindness. Her resolve culminated in bringing friends and family together, and while the palpable absence of Tom hovered in the background, the atmosphere brimmed with warmth, laughter, and encouragement. In her personal journey, Sarah had not only rescued her place within her family, but also embraced her identity as its matriarch. She was confident, respected, and seen not as the grief-stricken woman she once was, but as a pillar of strength, ready to provide comfort to her siblings. And as Sarah looked around the room, the glow of light and life radiating from her family, she allowed herself to bask in the satisfaction of what she had accomplished. They had forged bonds stronger than the grief that had once threatened to tear them apart, and together they stood resolute, ready to embrace whatever new chapters life had in store. "That's how we honor him," she thought, a true sense of fulfillment whispered within. "By growing together, despite it all." As Sarah's heart swelled with pride, she recognized the culmination of her transformation, not just a widow, but a purposeful warrior of family, ready to champion love and understanding above all. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.